we kind of just didn't really think about target audience. We didn't think about these sort of metrics, and we just wrote the movie that was honest and ambitious and exactly what we wanted to do. We aren't the kind of people who are so punk rock that we're like, let's trick the audience into watching a movie. We want to make it exciting. We still do our job, but it wasn't like the incentive wasn't box office success. The incentive was always tell the best story we can in the most inventive and cool way.
To start off with a question, for the films that won your Spirit Awards, can you discuss, if you're comfortable, the budget and the box office, and do you think these movies would be viable and reach the success they had in today's marketplace?
So Crash, the movie was made for $7 million, and it's made about $250 million worldwide. So that was a really good multiple. And would that movie do the same business today? I don't really know. I want to believe yes. My general feeling is that filmmaking itself hasn't changed so much. I don't think that producers and directors and creators is where the problem spot is. The problem spot is on the other side of the table, with frankly the buyers and fear and lack of vision and a conglomerization and a million other sort of degradation events we could talk about. But I still believe that good films that move people will work and will be that sort of crocus in the snow that will pop through. And if Everything Everywhere All at Once could work a couple of years ago, then I kind of believe that Crash could still work. That said, I don't feel like I could get it made anywhere near kind of as easily as I did because the pre-sales market was just so strong, and you didn't need to have domestic distribution to get a movie made, and you really could create a finance model where there just was such a small gap, and I'm finding that harder and harder. And the other big difference is it was way easier to get talent to work for nothing back then. It still happens, but we used to all be partners in the upside, and when theatrical was that guarantee, had an upside, the dream was alive, and it was possible to get the right definition and to get paid out. So there were a lot of things that motivated people to work on more artistic films. So I would do it all over again, but I do think it would be a bigger climb, harder to put the talent together, but I think the movie would still connect.
Yeah, I guess, sorry. I think you were getting applause, and I stepped on it. I'm sorry.
Could you do that again?
There you go. I guess I'll talk about Election, which was the first of our two films to win the Spirit Award. That was about an $8 million movie, another $2 for a reshoot. We had to reshoot the ending. It was at Paramount, weirdly. And at that time, Ron and I were sort of trying to find interesting projects and align with independent filmmakers that came strong out of Sundance and bring them into the studio. And we did that many times in our earlier, period. And so it was a weird studio film, Election. It was very, nobody had any idea what that was going to become. And it was kind of our job as producers to hide that fact from Paramount, and as long as we could. And ultimately, the movie got made. Paramount was sort of terrified about it, and they had made us promise to make a PG-13 movie, but they had approved the script, which was such a hard R you can't believe. And, when they turned to us afterwards and said, well, this isn't PG-13, we said, well, you approved the script. So, that's a thing about producing is often these misunderstandings you want to push back as far as you can, and by the time it's done, it's done. But then they didn't know what to do with it, and they wanted to just dump it. And thankfully, Sherry Lansing, who was the head of Paramount at the time, sort of came to the film's rescue and did a whole elaborate, wanted us to come up with a new ending, a more optimistic ending, which is kind of funny for anybody that sees the movie because, it ends with the idea that Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon are going to be at war with each other forever. But the movie didn't do all that well. I think it maybe made $12 million or something at the box office, but I actually think it would do better now, because another thing that happened at Paramount, their classics division rejected the film. So it came out through their main, in other words, if we had had the right people that understood the movie, I think it would have found a bigger audience. As it turned out, the reviews were great, and they went from being on 20 screens to being on 800, and the whole thing collapsed, and it didn't really make money. But I think it would have done much better today, if in the right hands. So anyway, that's my answer.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. Just a footnote on election, it was when everyone is wondering about the life of theatrical films and all that. To watch election, which was, as Albert said, they're just going to put it out on video. They had no belief in it. But then when it came out in a limited release, we loved going to the theater on La Brea. It was like a party every night because it was sold out and people were really going nuts, which was, we were so beaten down by believing what Paramount had to say about it that it was just great to experience that, which only happens theatrically. But moving on, I guess Little Miss Sunshine is the other winner, which had a kind of nice history in a lot of ways and a couple glitches. But, we had the script because Michael Arndt wrote it, and Michael Arndt was the assistant to Matthew Broderick on Election. So we didn't know he was writing away in an attic in Brooklyn, but he was. And then he just, gave us this as a finished script. And the movie is very close to his script, not a lot of changes. However, it took, even though it was a great script and obviously won an Academy Award with it, it was set up at a company, I guess unnamed, that thought it needed a lot of work, and it probably needed someone like Robin Williams to play the lead.
Focus.
Oh, okay. Close friends who we hope to do a film again soon.
It's a different regime. So.
Okay. But, that was back in the days. We actually had a second look deal, if you can believe it, to reminisce for a moment. We had a first look deal at New Line and a second look deal with this, person of substantial means who wanted to get in the film business and has directed now, Mark Turtletaub. So he bought the script initially, then it went to Focus, and then with all these ideas they had, he pulled it out and was going to finance it himself, which he did. And that allowed the kind of casting. And then it was, from there on kind of fantastic in the sense that it went to Sundance, pretty much sight unseen. There'd been one small friend screening, which was good, but not ecstatic. So when we were at Sundance, what's the name of the big one?
Eccles.
Yeah, Eccles. And it was sold out. It wasn't working for a while, and we thought this is a comedy that people aren't laughing, and so it goes. But when they pushed the VW van and the family all climbed in, the place became wild, and it was a great experience because it got a standing ovation, and it sold that night. And a lot of films, of course, no matter how attractive, don't sell overnight anymore at Sundance. So that was a kind of peak experience for us, and it did well.
Yeah, it was $6 million is what it cost. We did reshoot the ending again, and so it was 8 all in, and it ended up making, 100 worldwide, maybe 60 here, 40 overseas. So.
Yeah, it's one of the very few films that we've seen some money from. So we celebrate it, and it's also, for some reason, internationally, it's so well known that you would think when we go somewhere else, people say, I know Little Miss Sunshine, like it's the only film we made. So I guess we should be at least happy to have that identity.
Everything Everywhere was originally budgeted by, outside of A24, it was budgeted for like 62 million. And then we were like, well, there's no way we're getting that. And then we asked for them to do the half version, and it was like 38 million. And then A24 said, we'll give you 14. And so we made it for 14. And that's how it goes. And then globally, I know it broke A24's domestic record and international record. I don't remember the domestic number, but I know globally it's like at 190 now. But it just re-released in IMAX, so maybe it's crossed 200, who knows, right? And I think what our movie did was we kind of just didn't really think about target audience. We didn't think about these sort of metrics, and we just wrote the movie that was honest and ambitious and exactly what we wanted to do. We aren't the kind of people who are so punk rock that we're like, let's trick the audience into watching a movie. We want to make it exciting. We still do our job, but it wasn't like the incentive wasn't box office success. The incentive was always tell the best story we can in the most inventive and cool way. And I think that's still what we try to do, even though now we're working with Universal, which is great. And yeah, unironically great at Universal. I was just about to make a joke about Focus because they're in Universal, but whatever. Yeah, so I think that I view it as a beacon of hope that this movie that even A24, they released it in March of 2022, and then we won the Oscar in March of 2023. So we worked on that movie for a full year, which is incredibly rare. And I think most films that are, slotted to be awards films are released way later in the year for that reason. And so there was like a real groundswell of support for that movie, and you just kept going and going and going because there was an appetite for it. And I think from that, it's odd how it's come full circle. Now executives that are only thinking about target audience and not losing their job, they're like, oh, we need to find the next Everything Everywhere all at once. And I don't know how they're going to do that, but I hope they find the person to do that.
Well, thank you guys for all answering so optimistically. Now we will get real. In this particular moment, what do you guys think are the main challenges for independent producers?
Who's supposed to answer that?
Anyone that feels they have an idea.
Start. Go ahead.
The main challenges for independent producers? Well, you always want to keep your spirits up and be optimistic and maybe a bit realist about the economic marketplace forces and still just, keep feeling that there is a way. It's more limited now, and maybe it'll become a much bigger way. So, it's really balancing the fact that I don't think we can ignore that in this state of advanced corporate capitalism that certain forces came together, not just COVID, but other ones where equity money is, much less than it used to be. Buying at festivals is less. The scope and the adventurous spirit of some of the streamers has narrowed, even though they're still making a lot of films. They're not kind of taking wild card films in the way they did. So that's how people get sort of, maybe negative or a little bit sober about being an independent producer. I just think the producers have never been more active in this time of austerity and even scarcity than they are now. And it's kind of good to take that spirit of really not, even though it was great that you could just do a wild card film and have it be a huge success. A lot of films, it's kind of good to realize what really is being supported by the market. It's not like you should, just go out to find films that somehow fit a slot, but somehow, if it were a Venn diagram, what you want to do, what you want to say with films, and what is possible given today's marketplace and economics, and you hope there's a overlap, and that's an open door, at least a crack in the door, and a place to start, trying to get the film financed.
Yeah, I would add to that I think there's a shift in the balance between the sort of artistic effort side and the marketplace awareness side that definitely veers more towards marketplace now. And I think that the most important thing for producers and filmmakers, frankly, is to really understand the business we're in. It's not the kind of time where the art is found. That seemed to be, that was a part of it. But right now, there has to be a much more targeted understanding of what the marketplace is able to support. And it doesn't mean that, like Ron said, that you have to copycat or do what was done before, but to understand who the buyers are, what the platforms are, what their models are, which companies are connected to other ones and which ones are under which umbrellas. It's really important, like to educate yourself on the business side right now. It's always been show business, but it's sort of like show business right now. And and I think that's the most important thing, is to not sort of lay back and hope that somehow the business is going to find you. There's not even a pitching market anymore. I mean, that's a very different time. When I started, people ran around and pitched ideas. People invested in ideas without IP, without scripts. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I heard about something, a pitch. And so I think that we really have to understand that we have to build each project, particularly film. I don't know if we're talking about film and television here right now, but particularly for film, each one is its own business plan, and to really understand the business plan of the particular and the economics of what you're trying to do, so that you can have some targets and that you can speak, you can defend yourself to these buyers, whether they be independent, whether it's independent money or whether they're more institutional buyers, to be able to sell yourself first so that you can sell them. Because if you find yourself in those conversations and you don't know what you're selling or why it's going to work, and you don't have your comps and you don't understand where you're at in the marketplace, it's really just a big fat no.
Yeah, I think two of the main difficulties right now for independent producers, one is finding money for your film, certainly, and the other is, if you're lucky enough to make a film, the lack of imagination, I think, from the distributors is astounding these days. And something, it seems like so much of what happens to smaller films is, if they're lucky enough to get a release, it's a minimal consequence, all to trigger some kind of streaming deal. And people need to put the same love and energy into the marketing of a movie as they are into the making of the movie. So I think that's a key point. And one thing I have to say is that all of the films, though, that everybody on this panel won for, I think would have gotten made now, because they're all in very different ways bold and original and fresh in some way. And I think that still works, and it still flies. And I think we're going to see it in the fall. There's a lot of excellent films coming up in the fall, and people are starting to go back to the movies. And I just want to mention one thing that I've been working on with this woman, Annalisa Shoemaker, there, and as well as another woman named Barbara Twist. We've been doing these Zooms for the last year, trying to rethink the ecosystem as far as independent films and distribution. And we've got, festival people on the call, distributors, filmmakers, publicists, other people as well. And we're all trying to experiment with how can things be done differently, and how can you reconnect with that audience that I think we all know is out there still. People still love going to the movies. It's just getting people back in the habit. So anyway, that's my spiel.
And it's a good reminder that our business is cyclical, right? So the ideas that were being gestated and made during COVID are coming out now. And it's not like we see the success of one thing and we can be like, all right, there you go. It takes time to write those scripts and make those movies. We all know that. But I think when we look at the marketplace, we're like, man, there's a lot of dog shit out here. But it's because of these kinds of things. There's like a backlog there. So I am optimistic for what's coming out in the fall and next year, and I think it's going to be great. But I would say the hardest thing that I think independent producers are facing is just like, there's no like, how do you make a living, right? For me, when I made Swiss Army Man, like, I worked on it for 5 years and I made $30,000. It's like I had to make commercials, I had to do music videos, I had to work catering jobs, do construction. Like, I had to do other things to make money, And I luckily had a dad who was like wise enough to be like, don't go and do other things within the trade, or else they'll see you as that and they won't respect you as a producer. So I only would produce music videos and commercials and do things like that, and then would make money catering and whatever, because I don't come from privilege, So with the people that you are seeing that are able to do independent producing, they're coming from, they have a silver spoon. And that's fine, good for them, God bless. But I think that many of us in this room do not have that, right? How many of you are producers or wanting to be producers? You guys are masochists, and much love to you.
No, it's good to know that. Quite like a majority,
Yeah.
I think.
But I think that there is optimism there. Like the four of us are part of a group that are working really hard to make sure that this industry that is built on the backs of producers, that you get paid when you do that work. That right now we have this weird contract with the devil that we understand we'll work for free until the movie's greenlit, and once it's greenlit, then you'll pay us, even though it takes years to do that, so free labor. And we're trying to stand up here because we've gotten to this place, but we're never ever forgetting that we had to struggle to get to this place, and so we want to get all these studios to agree to something where people like you who are struggling to be independent producers can do it with a living wage without having to do it for free.
Well, and that leads me to two of my next questions. And one of them is if you guys could talk about the efforts you're doing with Producers United, and then also to talk about a little bit more about sustainability and what that looks like for producers and for you specifically, too.
Oh,
Yes.
you're
So-
the person for
So Producers United, have people heard of that? Do you know what that is? Let's see a show of hands if you've heard of Producers United. Okay, just a few. So this is a new effort that began around secretly or sort of subtly and softly began about a year ago, but we've just sort of been hitting our public phase in the last couple of months. And at the moment, it's a collective of 127 producers, and we call them career producers. This is a new expression that we've coined to try to help differentiate and recover the word producer from the degradation it's faced from being something that's bartered and sold to anybody who wants to call themselves that word. So we started, first of all, we had to, define who we were, and we call ourselves career producers. And one easy way to understand who a career producer is to ask if that person on the movie is being paid for anything other than producing. If they are, they're what we call a hyphenate. If they aren't, then they may be a career producer if, in fact, they're providing the full services from beginning to end of what it means to be a capital P producer or an executive producer in television. The reason I'm giving you the definition is because what we're advocating for is sustainability for career producers. And as Jonathan just mentioned, we got together, and by the way, it was pretty unique that this has happened because producers have traditionally been really lonely people that work on their own island and feel miserable, and I think we kind of still do. No. We are actually feeling really happy because now we have friends, and we're working together. And we started to say, what are we going to do? Because we actually looked at the producing landscape and we felt that it was falling off a cliff. We thought we were without hyperbole, we really believe that producing is facing an extinction event if we can't find a way to bring new people into the craft. And we were looking around and just seeing there was no way for next generation or emerging producers to find their way unless, in fact, they had the silver spoon. And so we started to figure out, what are the things that we should look at first, and we decided on basic rights, and that would be to be paid when we work and to get health insurance. I don't know. Those seemed kind of basic because we realized that producers were the only person on a film set that didn't have health insurance. And as Jonathan explained, this issue of working for free until the movie went. And I'll give you a little bit of history, and I won't take up too much time here. I'm going to leave it to my colleagues, but it's kind of a whole new way of thinking. But in 1971, the thing called a development fee was established, and it was a $25,000 fee that was given to producers who had formerly been on the lot, which was everybody, And what would happen is you would take your project to a financier, a studio, and you would ask, when will you make our movie? And they would say, in 6 months to 12 months, you'd get a date, and in between, you'd get $25,000. And that made some sense, actually, in 1971. So the problem is that that's fallen apart in both directions, right? So first of all, you don't know when the movie's going to get made. Secondly, there wasn't any increase, and only $12,500 is payable by most institutional buyers when you set a project up. And we put that little number into the government's inflation calculator, and it came out $196,000. And we thought, wow, imagine if we had just stayed at the same rate all these times. We'd get 100 and whatever, close to 190, almost $200,000 every time we set up a project. The next thing we figured out is that setting up didn't mean anything. So what is setting up a project? You go, you give the project to the studio or the network or the streamer, and then they say, we might make it, and we might pay you, and we might divide your salary up, and by the way, sign your rights over and sign a certificate. Well, that's not very American, is it? There's supposed to be a trade of services. So we are working as a group, first and foremost, to reestablish what we've now calling commencement wages instead of development fees, because we're talking about working when we're working. And how ironic that everyone else is being paid, the writers, even line producers and visual effects people, and the producers still aren't being paid. So we think that's the fundamental reason why producers are falling out, combined with the fact that there are no overhead deals anymore, and so no one can have a company because you don't have any income, so you can't train anyone. So we're working as a group on various different activations, and that was our first one, and we're going to try to do this until we fix this whole mess.
And to set the context.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also, I just have to big shout out to Cathy, because she's been the leader of this group and has done, there's a committee of people, but Cathy has been doing unbelievable work. And I would also just add, as independent filmmakers, all of you know that it's not just, development fees. If when your budget starts to get cut, it's the producer's fee they go after. It's not anybody else on the film. Or often, you're working in prep, and everybody else in the film is getting paid on an independent film, and you're not getting paid till the film starts filming. And so there's all sorts of indignities that we want to correct. I am also in charge with Naomi Dupree of the Indie Committee. So we're working on, best practices to share with financiers and with, hyphenate producers and all that, to try and protect the integrity of the credit as well as the fees involved, and to make it, as Cathy said, sustainable. So.
Yeah, and the thing that is important to note is that as we're here in the DGA, we are not a union. We are not a collective bargaining group. We're just a bunch of individual producers who have made relationships within this industry, and we're fighting on behalf of all of us. And we're just making deals as peers and being like, look, I'm working with you on this movie. I'm asking you to understand that this is something that down the road is going to be a problem for your studio. You should sign a deal now to make sure that we can ensure that there's going to be a longevity to this industry. And luckily, almost all the studios we've been talking to have come in for deals. So it feels as though this is something that's at a tipping point, and all of us are going to be able to benefit from it. It's not just for our members, it's for all career producers. And so hopefully there's going to be a lot more good news in the future. Didn't know it was going to be an advertisement for Producers United today, but
Think of it more like a pep rally.
And to that end, I think the conversation of sustainability, and Jonathan, you talked about it a little bit, but how have you all been able to sustain careers as producers? And have you had to do other things? How has that worked? Because it has been such a broken system for so long.
You want to go down the line? Okay, so for me, it's all about rigor. I just work so ridiculously hard. I work 7 days a week. I just do, and just believing and pushing through. For me, I guess that my secret has really been secret. I wouldn't call myself that successful, first of all, because although I make lots and lots of movies and shows, I never seem to get rich. So I thought that was the measure of things, but I think that, you know, for me, it's been about rigor more than anything else, but also about. I had another thought besides that, which was something about, what was it? I can't really remember, but just this idea that every problem is something new, and that I had to sort of change my relationship with the word problem, and to realize that that was the learning curve and sort of the fun of producing. Like, it kind of only exists if there are problems, because like that is sort of the definition of producing, is solving them. So they never happen when you want them to, or in the way that you saw before, they wouldn't be a problem. So I think as I started to sort of get into this, you know, rhythm of like, give me a bigger problem, give me another problem, give me another problem, I'm gonna solve it. It became like a challenge with myself, that if I could just get over another problem, I could get that thing up and running, and it usually works because I just never give up. But I think that the side effect of having to, like, the only way I've been able to do it is to keep giving away my upside to various different investors or partners or something to support the efforts. And so the weird part is that right now it's so unsustainable that you know, in order to have the machine that I need, a few people around me, a couple of, you know, executives and assistants to do the kind of work I do, I keep having to sort of give it away in order to have any way to do it to begin with. And that's the part that makes me frustrated, is that I want to believe that we can be independent producers and that we can run these enterprises ourselves and do what we want to do and still be able to put food on the table. And I think it's really, really hard.
Yeah, I think for us, we've really kept things lean over the years. You know, Ron alluded to golden era when we had studio deals and stuff for, you know, a good chunk of time. But
That's because I thought the topic of this panel was to reminisce about the last 40 years and all the opportunities that were missed.
yeah, all the good old days. Yeah, well, in the early stages and now, we've really gotten by with, you know, talking novelists into, you know, letting us run with their book, and, you know, getting them to understand that we'll set it up with somebody and they'll make more money that way than they would the, you know, $2,500 or something they'd get up front. So we've managed to keep our expenses down. And, you know, up until COVID, we were in an office with a sort of a great relationship with a bigger company, a very big company, a management company and producing company. Since then, you know, we've been doing that Zoom thing that everybody's been doing. And Ron's been kind of hysterical because, you know, you've always had this vision of the cardboard table and your office is wherever you are. And, you know, he's been in his cleaners in the back with all the, you know, the cleaning stuff and, you know, in a restaurant and all that. And we're just keeping it, you know, we're keeping our overhead down in all ways and, you know, trying to focus on the projects we're developing. So that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, you probably think Albert's exaggerating, but I go to my dry cleaners every morning and I have my own table there that we took from the office when we moved, and I set up my iPad and do early morning Zooms from there. And in the background it says TJ Cleaners, but you know, what can you do?
Well, the great thing is your cleaner is named Albert too, so you never know which Albert Ron is aligned with. But.
I mean, I also took 2 tangerines from the green room to eat later.
Wisdom.
Oh, that actually just reminds me of something. I'm sorry, Jonathan, but a few days ago, a number of us at Producers United went to have a meeting at one of the management companies, and we sat down in the lobby, and there were 7 producers, and all of them major producers whose names you know. And there was this big table of food sitting in front of us, and we were kind of crowded in the back of the room, like sit down here, looking at the food. And then someone came out and said, "You know, it's for you." And we were like, "What?" And they were like, "It's for you." And we were like, we thought there must be a celebrity coming in here. And it was really funny, and we started filling our pockets just like you did. Anyway, go ahead.
Producers and food.
Yeah. We'll do anything, yeah. We're like Gary Oldman in Slow Horses. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
I don't have any food anecdotes, I'm sorry. For me, I've already alluded to it, it was like I've been like, one of my superpowers is I'm a chameleon. I'm a jack of all trades, but I'm a master of none. And so, you know, I was an artist, a musician. I was good at sports. I was pretty good at school. Like, I was just okay at everything. And because of that, I realized my niche in this industry, as I looked at like the competitive advantage that I have, I was like, I'm never gonna have the agent connections as a young producer, or the sway that people have with money to be able to chase down established producers for these books or these scripts. So I was like, I can't do that. So what is my competitive advantage? Well, I'm pretty good at talking to directors, and I understand directors because I understand artists, and I myself view myself as an artist. And I was like, I think that's my way in. And so I became friends with artists who are writer, director, filmmakers. And that was my way into the industry, and I saw my niche, and I bet on myself, and it was right. And then during those dry months, like, I had to. That's the hardest part, is when you're like a freelancer and nothing's coming in, and you're like, well, rent's going to be due, and you can't call your parents for money. It's like, well, I guess I have to just work and do something else. And I would just always be like, I'm not too proud. I'm not someone who, like, we're in a town of image, but I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna go and work any job so I can just keep doing it. And so I think that, like, both understanding myself and being humble enough to understand that I can do any job, then I would do it. And I think construction, I highly recommend construction, and serving tables makes you better at life.
Yeah, I mean, I relate very much. For me, it was, you know, I felt like I kept producing everybody's samples that would get them huge movies, and then they would get produced. It would be Lionsgate, or it would be, you know, another studio, and they wouldn't bring me with them. They couldn't bring me with them. And so I was constantly producing these $1 million movies, and then the director would then go make a bigger movie with bigger producers. And I was managing writers and directors. I had a management company for 10 years. Like, there were so many things I had to do simultaneously, because that $10,000 fee that I would get for, you know, 6 years on a movie wasn't gonna pay the bills. And so when one of those directors came back to me and wanted to start a company with me, I knew that that was kind of the only way to get those bigger budgets, was like to be able to go that, you know, that route. It's really tough to be sustainable, but we're figuring it out. And I think you guys with Producers United are really helping for that, which is great. I think that we are gonna open it up to the audience for any questions at this point. Okay, I'm told there's a mic on the aisle. Both aisles, mics.
You know,
So-
one thing that I
Yeah.
was just thinking while somebody goes to ask a question is that the great thing about producing is, you know, anybody can declare they're a producer. There's no, you know, it's like you don't have to write a script. You know, you just have to have an idea or find material. But then the whole thing, you really do have to do the work to become a career producer. You know, so. But the doorway's open, you know what I mean? Like, anybody has an idea, or they find a book, or talk somebody into letting them run around with that book or whatever, you're a producer. So, or at least you're on the way. So anyway, it's a.
Yeah, I wanted to say something along those lines in hopes of getting some applause. Thank you. Thank you.
You should stop there.
I should stop, you're right. No, but I, you know, when I read the topic of this panel, I thought, you know, over the last 40 years, and Albert and I have gone to a lot of, you know, the Spirit Awards, and I recommend everyone, like our interns and all that, join Film Independent, and now Sundance Collab, and Dear Producer. And my point being that, you know, in some ways, you know, the market, the economic forces, the amount of financial opportunities are tighter. I sometimes say it's like musical chairs, but they take away 3 chairs each time. It's just harder to do. But when I was thinking about it, there's something great about being a producer now, especially, you know, starting as a producer, because when we were first, trying to get something together, you'd walk or to meet someone at Sundance, which is how we started with Steven Soderbergh, and then there was no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no Google. Maybe someone would call you, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe you have to send a postcard or something, or stake people out. So in a way, there's so many people that are smart, and we're amazed always by our interns who want to be producers. They're like, God, how did you get so sophisticated and smart about everything? So that's out there, but the resources to be able to have access to any book that's about to be published, to articles, to other people, to just start an internet search by one concept and have it take you 1,000 places. It's kind of magical of where the ideas for movies will come from. You're no longer waiting for someone to deliver a pack of paper that's 120 pages long. So, I know that people feel it's very tough, but I think it's also a really exciting time, and that all the advances in technology make it a really wide palette to find projects and explore being a producer. So,
I want to give you
thank you.
Yes. Let's start there.
How projects come to you. And I think for many of us, we view you as sort of inaccessible and literally and deservedly on a pedestal as you are because of the projects that you've done and the work that you've done to get to where you are. So where you are, how do things come to you at this point? Projects.
I mean, I could start. I mean, you're rightfully diagnosing a problem with our industry. Is it's an industry of gatekeepers. You can call the assistant to talk to the agent, to talk about an actor, to talk about a deal, but you'll never talk to them about the deal. And when things get hairy, you talk to the lawyer. It's all gatekeepers, right? And I think rightly so at times, because there's a lot of people who think that their movie should be a movie, and it's not great, right? I've gotten some, like Daniels and I, we have a thing at our company which is the weekly pass, and it's always the most insane things that we've gotten that week, and it's very entertaining. But I think my feeling, to go back to what I was saying, was, what is your competitive advantage? If you're playing the game that everyone else is playing and you're not good at it, don't play that game, right? If you have a partner where you're like, oh, we can do this thing and we can develop something together, and then that will pique some interest somewhere. If you're following something that's true, that it's exactly what Albert said. Like all those movies that we made, I do think they would all still be successful because they are good films with good characters, good plot. They understood the stuff versus like, just give me the opportunity, boss. Just put me in, coach. And I don't think you're asking that. I don't think you're saying like, how do we just get the golden ticket? But I think that the most important thing is to know, what am I good at? What brings me joy? What is the thing that I need to say in this world? And if that's truly your thing in this world, people will tune into that frequency. And then it's like, oh, you got something to say. Okay, let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
No one else?
I think they come from everywhere. The ideas that are projects, from an unpublished manuscript, or as I said before, we are very lean. We don't have development executives and all that, so there is a difficulty with the amount of reading that we have just to respond to notes of our own projects and stuff that comes one way or another. But I think you just have to find the right fit for your material. Think about who has made films in the vein of what you're trying to get out there, and just figure out how to get it to them. There are a lot of gatekeepers, and it's often it's not going to be through an executive, but you just got to figure out creative ways to get in front of your material in front of people.
Yeah, I agree. There have been times in my career where nothing is coming in, like scripts are not being sent to me and articles and books, and then there's been times when there's more, and I've always found that regardless, it's like the self-generated stuff that you're like searching for, or other, like talking to people and hearing ideas. I used to produce a play series of short plays that friends wrote, and I had like a first look at making them into a movie, and my first movie started as this short play that I did a Kickstarter to raise money to put up. Like, I think it's like, doesn't need to, you don't have to be, on a pedestal to get the good material. I think it's whatever you're really passionate about that you can push up the mountain.
That was part of what I meant to say in that last bunch of sentences was that it's so democratic now. I mean, not to at all say it's the highly competitive thing and the shrinking of the market isn't a challenge, but the idea that, books, ideas, anyone who has a computer, when you think how it used to be, it was a country club in a way, and I never felt part of the country club, but nevertheless it existed, where you had to have lunch with an agent and then sort of prove your worth or something, and then they'd send you a script. It's really, wide open. It's an incredible time, and it's going to even be more that way in the next year or two as technically things develop. So, you can sit in a foreign country and be 90% what you can do right here.
I did want to add one quick thing. I'm sorry to drag this out because there's so many questions, but on Peanut Butter Falcon, I remember the directors, they had this actor, Zach Gottsagen, who has Down syndrome, and they actually built a little boat, and they filmed a couple of minutes from every key scene in the movie, sometimes 20 seconds, with Zach acting against one of the directors. And it kind of blew our minds, and you could see that this kid could support a whole movie, he could carry a movie, and that these guys knew where to put the camera. So there's creative ways that you can add to your project to have them pop out. So.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Chrissy. So my question is about marketing specifically. We're talking about how oversaturated the market is, how much media has changed, digital media, and especially with social media, the internet, and all the different streaming platforms. How has your marketing strategies changed, and how do you think they're going to continue to change?
Well, one thing that producers are doing a lot of now is building into their budgets marketing money, and that seems to be really crucial. People are even talking about this term, a marketing producer, which I don't know if you've come across that, but you really need to think going in, or once the thing starts to get rolling, that you can't wait until the end, and you have to be ready, because there's so much being done now in direct distribution. Annalisa does that. A lot of people are doing that very effectively, and as a producer, you need to be partnered with, the distributor on the marketing side. You need to really do things to sort of show them, your movie better than anybody, and you need to come in with materials to show them the way.
One thing that was cool that Daniels and I did on Swiss Army Man, and then we just kept doing it on our other films, was whenever we were in a meeting or a rehearsal or whatever, we would just set up an iPhone or a GoPro at the time and just record it. And from that, once we made a deal, we had all the BTS, right? So if you don't have a big budget, a lot of, if we're making a movie, we have a marketing company that's within one of the studios, or sometimes they'll bring in an outside marketing company, and each individual director, actor, they all have their publicists. So it's a whole machine when you get into a bigger movie. But when you have a small movie, you have an iPhone, you can always be getting BTS. And what everyone's gonna need for marketing materials is nice set stills. So you can always allocate some money on your budget towards unit photography, actually get a good photographer who stands next to your camera and gets those stills. Or also just be filming any content that you think this could work for social media, because you probably are more tapped in than some of these out of touch executives. So just be filming stuff constantly and have a big like hard drive of things that you can always hand off to your distributor.
So true. All that.
And just to add, this is for Cathy, something that I learned from Cathy on the idea of you, even if you have a huge company spending marketing, it's still really on the producer to like push and come up with ideas and still, not fall out at that phase. I think that producers are on a movie from the very, very beginning to the very, very bitter end. And I know you really, really pushed on the marketing for that.
Yeah, I like to embed my own little sort of sneaky photographer and social media producer into the movies now. So in addition to whatever unit the studio or the financier might be providing, I also find a way to have somebody who's doing a much more kind of grassroots. I usually use the same person, Brittany, and she's like a little sneaky mouse, and she runs around and she's always in the place where nobody else is, and she gets a lot of stuff, as we go, and I find that stuff really, really important. And then also I think, just once these bigger marketing machines are engaged, to not necessarily think that just because they're there, that they're good. And like just to keep sort of challenging, what those things are, that they're saying, and to keep remembering what was grippy from the beginning about the idea, because it usually hasn't changed too much. But thanks for saying that.
Thank you guys so much.
Hi, my name is Eddie. I made my first successful feature 1 to 2 years ago and sold it. And I remember it being great wide audience and everything. And then afterwards, after selling it, I felt, is that it? I felt like that. And so one of the things I started asking other much established producers was, after you sold your first film, what is that magic number? Or how many films are you doing 5, 6, 7 films and then per year? And does that make it feel like a sustainable career? And how long did it take you to get there? Because one of the things I asked my EP when I first sold that film was hey, is this what it's supposed to feel like? I was like, yeah. And he's all like, Eddie, you just got to look at it like this. It's at Sundance, in any given year, most of those films are not sold. You're part of the elite 1% that actually sold a film. I was like, I don't know if that makes me feel any better, but I'm curious, how did you get there after your first few films, and how many films are you juggling, and that's what makes it a sustainable career? I'm curious.
And was that film bought by a streamer or by a theatrical?
It was bought by POV.
It's a tricky balance. You really, I think right now we've got too many things we're juggling, and then it draws attention away and focus away from the things that are closer to get going. When we first started, though, it took us 3 years to make King of the Hill, the Steven Soderbergh film, and at the end of it, we looked at each other and we said, "What's next?" And we realized we should have been developing things all along. So, it's like you want to have as many things going as you can handle effectively, I think. You can't rely on any one thing going, so you at least need, 5 or 6. We have many more than that, though. We probably got 15 things we're working on, and it's like whack-a-mole. Sometimes you don't pay attention to one for a long time, and then all of a sudden you have an idea. But everybody's different, though. I don't know what your load is, either of you.
I work on about 30 at the same time.
Come on, Cathy.
Kathy's a
I'm
psychopath.
actually not kidding. So about 30. But for me, the sustainability comes from television. I really think that it's very hard to do it all on film. I think it's, you know, you have so little control as to when and if it can go. And it just seems like, at least with something episodic, it can go more than once. You know, so if you can get over the hump and there's more episodes to be made, there's some sustainability to it. But that weird feeling, I've lost where the guy went that asked the question, but that weird feeling of, well, what's it supposed to feel like? I thought you were going to say was coming more from the fact that, you know, there's such a glut of content, and then the lack of theatrical that, you know, there's sort of there's no there. I do feel consistently with the streaming films like that there's I don't even know, like it's as if like the day that it comes out and the next day and the day before are all the same. Like I think that's really, really hard because people are watching things in their own home, and it's hard to sort of get that sort of kinetic sense. We had a really unusual experience on The Idea of You, which is an Anne Hathaway movie that we both worked on, which they liked. Somebody did. And, you know, we actually saw Amazon do the most active streaming campaign that I had seen to date. And they were actually, it was really good timing for us because they were trying to prove that it was possible because they were under so much criticism that the movies were coming and going without any sort of sense of identity, and they really went to town on our film, and they did, you know, a kind of campaign that almost resembled a theatrical campaign, and so we had more of a feeling, and as a result, there was a sort of a sense that like it was washing over audiences at the same time, you know. But I think that the big feeling comes from, you know, that there's too much and nobody knows when it's happening, and you miss half the things, and it's mostly at home.
My OCD is like, I want to make sure you two can go, and there's only one person there, so you two should go over there, and then you can ask your question. Yeah, you know, so then you can just...
No, you don't really
Okay,
have to.
never mind. I'm just saying, you don't have to go. Apparently,
We're
we don't
gonna
have
get
enough
We
time.
have time for one more question.
Oh.
Yeah, unfortunately.
We're going to start talking. Get your questions out real
Yeah.
Well, mine will be super quick, so maybe somebody else can get a chance to. Actually, it's back on the back of streaming. So, you know, the movies we were discussing earlier were all theatrical, and I'm thinking in terms of compensation for producers. How does that differ if, for example, you're doing it for streaming? You know, when does the revenue come in? Whether the revenue opportunity is there versus movies that are going to be theatrical? So, just to talk about the difference between those two.
You mean that advance money I was talking about before?
Yeah, like in terms of like, you know, like you were saying, it took like, you know, you made like 30 grand after like 5 years. You know, like if you're making it for streaming, like, you know,
Like
how does
back
that
end,
differ?
I think, is the question.
Yeah, back end,
Yeah.
when you're not getting a theatrical back end versus.
Well, you know, even theatrical isn't giving a theatrical back end, if you really want to know the truth anymore. You know, those corridors are pushed too far out, really, to see much, you know, economics there. But yeah, in streaming, there's a buyout, which is a pre-negotiated additional fee that comes, you know, quite soon after the movie drops on that streamer. So oftentimes you'll see it, but it can be very small. And it certainly doesn't change on the basis of the performance of the picture.
Right.
But quickly, like there's a difference between fixed comp and contingent comp, and your fixed comp is the money you get for making the movie, and the contingent's like all your back end stuff. Don't believe the lie that you're gonna get money down the road. Get your money up front for the work you're doing. That's the one bit of advice I'd say to you. If you can't, negotiate for your fee up front, because I bet you we could count on our hands how many movies we've seen back end for on our
Yeah,
hands.
I mean, I can tell you, I've produced 33 movies and I've seen back end once.
Yeah, I think we've done about 30, 35 and seen back end 2 or 3 times, I guess.
And you're going to hear every single time, well, okay, we can't really pay up front, but we're going to give you way more points on the back end. Be like, cool, but I still need to get paid for my labor, right? Especially if you're going to be the career producer doing all the work, get paid.
And also, it's very hard to get that money on the back unless you do an audit. Like, they're not going to pay it unless you go collect it. They don't just say, oh, by the way, here's that money we owed you. Like, you have to go believe that it's there and go get it, and it can be really expensive. I just did one, you know, and you know, we collected, I don't know, around $210,000, but it cost us $75,000 to do it. You know, so take that balance. But it was just so epic, and it took 4 years.
Yeah, you know, just to another PU, Producers United initiative, we've started to think in the independent realm of building in an audit into the waterfall. So once investors made 85% back, there'd be a corridor where money would be available to do an audit. If it was, in 85% of the way back of making the investors money. So yeah, I mean, these are crucial because they're expensive audits, as you
Yeah,
said.
and you have to
So-
believe, you'll ask, well, did you have was there an upside? And they're going to say no, but you have to believe the answer is yes, and then you have to make that decision, am I going to spend that money on the audit to get it? And so you kind of have to do your own investigation and your own math anyway, but it's particularly for producers to get the money up front.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Doris. We made for $1 million, and it did $15 million in the box office, and it took, still needing to sell it to a streamer before I saw any money from that movie. So it takes a long time.
Thank you.
Can we do one more? One more.
Hi, how are you? My name is Shane Smith. I'm a producer. I kind of had two questions. I would consider myself a career-ish producer. So I wanted to know what it takes to get into the producers union, and if there's any projects you guys can talk about that you're working on. Can you let us know what we can expect from you in the near future?
I think the question was, she's a career-ish producer, and how do you get into the Producers United, right? Yes.
There is
yeah.
a different thing called Producers Union. Ours is Producers United, but if you can go to producersunited.com and it'll give you the membership qualifications. I know there was one other question, so I feel like we shouldn't spend time talking about something you can find online, but it's right there, and it'll explain exactly what you need to do.
What are you working on?
Other movies we're doing.
Yeah, other movies you're working on that you're excited about.
What movies you're working on that you can talk about?
Yeah.
Ron, you can talk about that. I just want to say, before we get the mics cut off, that please go to movie theaters to see movies, particularly independent theaters. So.
Well, I feel a little foolish because I tried to gather my thoughts on expanding one's consciousness based on regrets and lost opportunities, and not one question about that. But Jonathan reminded me that, and this is, for another talk, I guess, that while I was a Sundance mentor or resource person or something, he pitched me Swiss Army Man, and I guess I sat there and listened to it and thought, well, what the heck is that? I think, although I'm being somewhat facetious, it's really great to do whatever you can to imagine an expanded universe where a film that's not conventional might actually work. And when you see it at a film festival, you say, wow, that can actually be done that way. And some of them don't work, like I guess Megalopolis has the live person standing up and addressing the screen. Maybe that won't work. But if you see the Nickel Boys, for instance, that's almost like an art film for 2 hours. And, it's controversial, but wow, what a kind of mind-bending film to be made in a big way. Anyhow, I'll save the rest of those remarks for a coffee or something.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you to this amazing panel of producers.
Thank you, Jordan.